Hi, Dean Hummels.
Hey, how are you doing today?
Good, how are you?
I'm doing well, thanks.
Glad to hear it.
Cool.
For those of you who don't know, my name is Kent Berkman. I am a current sophomore at Purdue, double majoring in marketing and Spanish, originally from South Florida. And I am joined today by Dean Hummels, who is the Dr. Samuel R. Allen Dean of the Krannert School of Management and Distinguished Professor of Economics. Dean Hummels, thanks so much for joining us.
You bet. Is this going to freak you out if I'm inverted? Should I go back to the other one?
If you could.
Okay. All right.
Thank
Sorry.
you.
There we go. How's that?
Does that work all right for you?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Awesome.
I have an elaborate setup here where it's all,
very elaborate
on 5 different things. So I'm sure it'll work.
Awesome. So as a professor, your area of specialty was international economics. Could you tell us a little bit about the research you conducted and the courses you taught?
Yeah, sure. I do a lot of work. So I've been teaching for about 25 years now, and classes at all different levels on international trade and international economics. The research that I do covers a lot of different areas connected to that. So if you've heard the expression offshoring, sort of taking pieces of production and moving it overseas, sort of looking at the extent of that, how it affects labor markets, how it helps makes firms be more productive. So a lot of work on that. A lot of work on how airplanes have transformed international commerce, both by moving people back and forth and moving goods back and forth very, very quickly. It's actually one of the really interesting things that's going to potentially change coming out of the pandemic is these incredibly tight connections in time between places that you can accomplish via airplanes. So it's going to be a really interesting question how that changes in the months ahead.
For sure. That was actually going to be my follow-up question, how you see your research changing or your courses you're instructing changing because of this.
Well, I think it's sort of there's an expression, never let a good crisis go to waste. And what we're seeing in the economics discipline, like a lot of other social science disciplines, is a lot of work being done right now to understand this very unusual period. For context, for those of you who are watching who might be, 18, 19, 20 years old, whatever. So I'm 52, and this is the strangest, most disruptive thing I've ever seen in a half a century. And so, almost everything has changed. And so I think that we're likely to see really large movements in how people move around. In some sense, if you might think about the core of modern economics being an extreme division of labor, right? Subdividing production up, not just between one firm and another, but one person and another.
Sure.
And for that to work, you have to have really frictionless movement of goods and people and ideas between physical places. And everything about this situation stands in the way of that division of labor. And so, I think it's going to be very interesting to see if this is a, 1-year thing and then it goes away, or how we will rethink both the wisdom of that extreme division and how resilient our processes and our firms and our institutions are in the wake of disruptions.
Right. It just goes to show you how important majors like the supply chain one are that Krannert offers.
Oh, no, absolutely. I think the reality is if you have a complete, by the way, I'm going to take my earphone. Can you hear me okay still?
Yes, for sure.
Okay, so I don't have to look silly anymore because I realized my thing was coming through my phone speakers, not through my AirPods.
Whatever you prefer.
Yeah, good. Okay, so I can look a little bit more normal now. By the way, what kind of designer came up with these things? I mean, these things are bizarre, but they sell a lot, so I guess they know what they're doing.
I guess.
If you're dealing with a period in which supply chains are highly stable, right? You don't necessarily need experts, right? You just sort of figure it out one time and then you just keep going. The point where you really need supply chain expertise, and we're among the best schools in the entire world at global supply chain and operations. it's when things are disrupted, and it's when things are uncertain, and it's when you're trying to figure out, how do I organize my production and my sourcing relationships when the political environment can change and the physical environment can change, and how do I ensure that things continue going forward? That's when you need expertise, and that's, I think, where the faculty and the programs at Krannert are actually really going to stand out for those capabilities.
Absolutely. Speaking of change, how did your responsibilities change once you became Dean of the Krannert School of Management?
You know, it's interesting. So I was on faculty at Krannert for 14 years before I stepped down into the dean's office, and on faculty at University of Chicago for about 5 years before that. And you know, faculty work extremely hard, and they work very long hours, but they have this great blessing in their work lives of autonomy. And what I mean by that is, a faculty member wakes up every morning and decides pretty much, how am I going to spend my day in a way to you know, have the most productive outcomes for me, given what I'm trying to accomplish. But there's also a trade-off there in which you have a little bit of limited impact, a lot of autonomy, but limited impact. You know, the 30 or 40 students in your classroom, the 30 or 40 people who might read one of your research papers. So as dean, what changes is you lose a lot of autonomy. You go from having no boss effectively to having 3,000 or 4,000 bosses. Every student, every faculty and staff member, every alum in some sense is your boss. And so you have to be really, really responsive to all of those different individuals. The trade-off that comes with that is the scope for impact is much, much, much greater. That if you do things better, you can affect thousands of lives. And that's a pretty exciting thing, pretty exciting opportunity to have.
Right, for sure.
So I have a lot more meetings than I used to. I have to switch from one topic to the next really, really quickly. So you know, I might in my faculty life have spent 10 hours thinking about a single narrowly defined problem. And now I think about problems for about 15 or 20 minutes at a time, resolve them to whatever extent I can, move on to the next thing. And so it's sort of, I think it requires a different way of thinking, and it can be a little bit exhausting switching in that way. But
Sure.
but if you get good at it, you can get a lot done.
I bet. You mentioned faculty. I know that Purdue has most of their staff and faculty working from home right now, obviously because of the current conditions. Do you find yourself working from home every day?
So I have been, with the exception of, there have been a couple of times when I've needed to run an all staff and all faculty meeting. And given that I had 200 plus people on the line, I wanted to make sure that my internet connection was solid and I had no problems. I've also got, at home with me now, I've got my 3 kids, one of whom is teaching 8th graders in a classroom in Dallas.
Oh my gosh.
Remotely. My son, who's a teaching assistant for undergraduate classes at U Chicago. So they're both conducting classes from the house, and my youngest child is taking classes simultaneously. So we have a text group where someone will text, everybody else shut up, I'm on a critical call right now, and then we have this kind of argument about who has to be quiet and who gets the high bandwidth. So that's been fun. Also, you might hear my dogs skittering around in the background. They don't realize that we all have important things to do. Feel like they should get all the attention. So any moment now, I may have a golden retriever burst through the door and jump on the screen.
I'm sure the viewers wouldn't protest to it.
No, it's fine. So how's it been going for you over the last couple of months?
Pretty good. Like I said, I'm in South Florida. So it's been crazy, but I'm sure it's crazy all over the US. It's been an adjustment for sure. The transition to online classes, I think, went really well. My professors in both Krannert and the College of Liberal Arts seemed pretty prepared for the shift.
Good.
But it was still an adjustment, but I think it went well, all things considered.
Well, I think I feel like this is going to sound a little bit like bragging, but we spent a lot of time in the weeks and months ahead of when the lockdown orders went into effect, getting ready for this, because we saw what was to be effective in business and effective in running a business school. You have to learn how to kind of look around corners at what might come and learn to be resilient. And so, we saw, mid-January, what was happening with the universities in Asia, and the fact that they were all having to sort of switch to online delivery given the pandemic. And our first thought was, well, maybe it's going to stay there. But then once it started to spread to Europe, it became clear that that containment had been lost. And so we started as early as, I want to say, late January, to put in a pretty robust and resilient response package. And what that looked like is, you have to start from like really basic things, like, do faculty and staff have the equipment and the software patches they need to conduct classes from home? And are they up to speed on all of the most, up-to-date remote delivery capabilities? And what do we need to do to ensure that our IT staff were physically protected? Right. Because you lose your IT staff in the middle of all this, and then the whole thing dissolves. Mm-hmm. So there was probably about a 4 to 5 week period where we were making very significant investments of time and money and effort, so that if this were to occur, we'd be ready to do it. And so, we feel like, all things considered, it's gone as well as it possibly could have. And so I'm glad to hear that's true from a student perspective as well.
I think it's definitely a terrible situation that happened to the United States and the world, but I think, yeah, for sure we handled it really well, and I think most of the U.S. did too, for sure, university-wise.
Yeah, I think that's right. But I think the thing that's pleased me so much is, that there are times when you're sort of living your regular life and you feel like, there's some minor inconvenience, and it blows up into this really big thing, and it can consume your whole day. And the extent to which Purdue and Krannert faculty and staff and students just sort of said, all right, what's important here? Let's put aside the stuff that's of minor consequence. Let's sort of all hands on deck to make sure that we can deliver in this environment as well as we possibly can. And I got to say, sometimes universities get a bad rap for being unresponsive or kind of slow to move. The number of major transformational changes that have taken place, on the time scale of hours and days, as opposed to months and years, has been really, really gratifying. So tons of hard work and a lot of folks doing their best goes a long way.
For sure. So what most people are probably wanting to hear about, you co-chair the Safe Campus Task Force created by President Daniels in response to the virus. Could you tell us a little bit about the task force work and what you guys have all been working on so far?
Sure. So there's really been 2 phases to this. The first phase, which kicked off, it's been about 6 weeks ago now, was a group of 15 of us, a mix of administrators, faculty, and staff, who were focused on the question of identify every single thing we might do to make campus safer to return to in the fall. And so we broke into 6 different sub-teams. Let me see if I can remember all the teams. One was on academics, one was on facilities, one was on residence halls and student life, one was on workforce protection, one was on sort of overall health and safety. And then the final was what we called command and control. In other words, how you keep all this whole thing held together and organized. And we sent, we did a kind of, this is sort of interesting strategy thing to do, organizational strategy. We did a kind of red team, blue team structure. So we had groups organized into these blue teams where we basically said, identify the most important problems you have to solve in your space, come up with a series of ideas for how you could address them and how effective you think they're going to be, how feasible it is to implement them. And then we handed that to the red teams and we said, tear these apart. Like
Hmm.
rip all these ideas up, make them better by challenging them as hard as you can. And so that kind of back and forth process, because we weren't able to ever physically meet through all of this,
Right.
it all took place virtually. We managed to generate a huge amount of ideas in a very fast manner that will basically address all aspects of campus life. Okay, so that was kind of phase one. We did that in 3 weeks, which if you sort of say rethink all of campus life in 3 weeks, you'd say that's not possible, but we actually made a ton of progress. At this point, we've now handed off all of those ideas to implementation teams who are going through and in a kind of prioritized way are implementing the recommendations of the task force. And so I have to be a little careful about getting ahead of some announcements from the president and the board of trustees here, because some of those things will roll out here pretty quickly. But we've had these different task teams that are solving a bunch of problems connected to residence halls and dorms, connected to PUSH, the student health center, basically putting in a very robust so testing, contact tracing system on campus. One of the pieces that I'm most excited about is we're going to announce here in the next day or two an initiative that will be run out of Krannert called Project X Safe Campus. And the idea is to form student consulting teams who will work to solve problems specific to student life in the wake of the pandemic. So their client is going to be Vice Provost Beth McCuskey and Student Life, and those teams will train them on consulting techniques. They will then work as consultants for the next 5 or 6 weeks to solve all those problems. And then on the far side of that, that becomes a kind of high-powered internship for all of the students who participated, because some of the companies are finding it difficult to run in residence internships this summer. So they will have played a critical role in getting campus ready for the fall and ensuring that sort of student life is as robust as it possibly can be, and to make the experience as rich as it ever has been, in light of the sort of safety precautions we have to take. So I'm really excited for that, both to improve the safe campus outcomes, but also to give students a chance to really become expert consultants in solving major problems.
I think that's a great opportunity, and I know Krannert students enjoy consulting and the potential of it, and I think that's definitely a huge opportunity for those students.
Yeah, we're excited to see how it goes. I mean, I think it's going to be tied to our communication center and all the case competitions we do there. So it's essentially a 5-6 week kind of case competition consulting experience, and then at the far end of it, students will have a portfolio that represents their summer work, which I think will really be critical to them having great placement outcomes on the far side of this.
That's fantastic. Have you or President Daniels spoken or seen from other universities that they're working on a similar idea with a task force and seeing the potential for change?
Yeah, so there's a lot of motion out there right now from universities that are trying to figure this out. I would say that we have been far ahead of any other university that I'm aware of in terms of when we jumped on this and how far we've gotten in it. But I think there's a general recognition that if at all possible, universities want to be back in residence if they can be, but that there are a lot of challenges that have to be overcome to make that happen. Now, some of them have kind of run the white flag up already, right? Mm-hmm. So the Cal State system has basically said we're not going to be in residence.
Right.
And others have said, like the president, I think at Brown University and the president at Northeastern University have been very definitive. Yeah, we're going to be back in residence also. So I think everyone's trying to wrestle with this. Everyone wants to be back in residence, and I think that there are differences across universities in how they perceive their ability to adjust to the new environment.
Mm-hmm. I've read a lot on the news about colleges who are like Purdue who are hoping to be back in the fall, that the wording is cautiously optimistic.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think that's fair because, so anytime you are dealing with a once in 100 year situation, you have to be honest that you can't predict exactly what's going to happen between now and August, right? The best thing that we can do is to build in the most resilient, best prepared campus we possibly can, and then what happens in a sense
Right.
that we're really hoping that that there are significant improvements in both state and federal capabilities in terms of testing and tracing and
Right.
and medical treatments and all that kind of stuff. But a lot can happen in 3 months. So
For sure.
we'll see how things go.
For sure. And in regards to the task force, I know that Purdue opened that up to the student body and staff as well, for opinions. Could you share some of those or the progress on that?
Yeah, so the way this worked was I knew that as soon as President Daniels announced the task force, I was going to get about 4 million emails from people with ideas, expressing concerns, or so on. So what we did was we created a website that people could go to and write to us with their ideas, and they could kind of categorize it under which group it was, and then we had those 6 different implementations,
Right.
six different teams, and that kind of it fed those ideas to those teams. So this was there's a little bit of everything mixed in here. Some of it had to do with the underlying science of the disease and what we understand about transmission and how to stop it. Some of it involves some really cool ideas about how to conduct a safer classroom, or a safer dormitory or cafeteria experience. Some of it were sort of questions about what kinds of things will we and will we not be able to do. So what we basically got from that was hundreds of people suggesting ideas, not a dozen, and also got to get a sense of really what was top of mind in terms of people's concerns, that we could devote more time to addressing.
That's great. It's definitely great that you were able to offer that to the community, just so that you weren't overwhelmed and President Daniels wasn't overwhelmed as well too.
Well, I think when you have something that's important like this, you really get a clear sense of how much the Purdue community cares about the quality of the experience, the safety of all the community, and how full of ideas they are, right?
Right.
And so I think this is an important note for the folks out there who might want to lead organizations. When you present a lot of ideas in a top-down way without engaging people, folks can be resistant to an idea that they might otherwise be much more accepting if they were part of the process of suggesting those solutions. So really our goal with this was not just to get good ideas, which we certainly did, but to have the community on campus feel like they were part of the process.
That's great. Before we move on, we're getting a lot of questions about that consulting opportunity you mentioned.
Yep.
Do you have any idea who that would be open to within Krannert?
Yeah, so this is going to be open to all students on campus. And so Melissa Evans, who runs the Communication Center, will be sending out an announcement, I think, in the next day or two. So the idea is really that we want to form team, sort of cross-functional teams. So we'd love to have, for example, an information system student working together with someone from human resources, working with a mechanical engineer, and someone from nursing. So one of the things that we are very good at Krannert and Purdue is saying, if you talk to people who are educated and trained in exactly the way you are, you don't learn nearly so much as when you talk to people whose training and whose mindset is different from yours, because you just generate better ideas and come at problems from a lot of different angles that you wouldn't otherwise think of. So we'll form those teams. The call out will go out shortly here. And anybody, it's going to be a free experience. We're not going to charge anybody to do this, and we will be enthusiastic for a dedicated and productive workforce to solve some of these problems for us.
That's great.
Yeah.
On a bit of another topic, So based on who you ask, Purdue could either have a friendly or a fierce rivalry with another Big Ten school down south. But I read online that both business colleges are working to handle demand for Indiana hospitals. Could you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so this is a pretty exciting initiative. You know, if you followed the news from the pandemic carefully, one of the really scary things was the extent to which not just lots of people were getting sick, but that hospital systems, first in China, then in Italy, and then in New York City, were really overrun by cases, right?
Right.
And so it became very clear that the other hospital systems around the rest of the country need to prepare for what are we going to do if we wind up with an enormous surge in cases, and how do we handle that? So one of our supply chain professors, Ping Shi, worked with some collaborators at IU on developing models for how hospitals could adjust how they allocate their medical care capacity for different purposes, so those hospitals could dramatically surge their capabilities. And what that does is it enables the hospitals to very rapidly switch from normal operating mode into sort of COVID intensive mode, adjusting both the personnel and the physical facilities and so on, and do it in a way that protects the healthcare workers, that enables all the folks who come in to get the care that they need. And so it's been a great example of a collaboration, not just between universities, but with a really important industry that needs our expertise in real time. They don't need it 3 years from now after we've studied the problem and written papers in academic journals. They need the solutions right now. And so it works. It's very consistent with the way we do a lot of our work in experiential learning programs at Purdue. You find a really interesting sector of the economy, in this case healthcare, that's got a very pressing problem that they don't know how to solve by themselves. That creates a learning opportunity for the faculty, for the students who are involved in the process, and it creates better outcomes for that industry. So we've been really excited by that. I actually sit on the board of the IU Health hospital systems, and so seeing from that, both from a dean perspective of what my faculty member was involved in, but also seeing from the IU Health board perspective how their surge capacity has adjusted has been pretty thrilling.
That's great. Going off of that, I'm not in Indiana, like I said, right now, and I know that most of our viewers probably aren't either for prospective students. Could you tell us a little bit about where the governor is right now on reopening things?
Yeah, so there's a multi-step plan that basically gauges where the state's at in terms of new case counts and that sort of thing, and then sort of gradually opens different sorts of venues with sort of being mindful of kind of two things: safety and community health. Health is paramount, but that as soon as can be done safely, reopening business is going to be important for the financial health of the state and its citizens. I think this is one of these. So I'm an economist, right? And so we think in terms of trade-offs. And one of the really hard parts of this whole process is, what's the trade-off between protecting community health and protecting the health of the economy?
Right.
And I think the right solution has been, for the last couple of months, to err on the side of protect community health, stop the spread of the disease. But then as we sort of emerge from that, and as case counts drop, then finding ways to very, very safely and gradually reopen is really kind of the word of the day. So we'll see how that all evolves. I think we started to see some restaurants and bars open up on, I think it was Monday, at half capacity. And for those of you who don't know, the local institution and right next to our business school is Harry's Chocolate Shop. There was a really long line out the door. People should have been wearing masks, but they weren't. So we still have some ways to go on that.
That's good to see that businesses are opening up in the area, though.
They are, yeah.
That's great. Um, so you seem to be pretty busy. You said that you're working from home and that you go into the office as needed. I know that you're working with your responsibilities as dean, as head of the task force. You're also head of the IU hospital system, like you said. How do you manage your time right now?
Yeah. So you know, it's a little bit challenging. I think part of it is I don't know if you're. Let me ask you this question: Are you losing track of days of the week?
Oh, for sure. Definitely losing track of the days of the week.
Is today Thursday? I just and so part of it is I just sort of work all the time. I mean, there's kind of
Just
that, right?
constantly busy.
Yeah, and part of it is the normal rhythms of, you know, you're in the office Monday through Friday around other people are kind of gone, and so things
Right.
start to change in that way. But I think what's really important in all of that is when I first became dean, I was working, I don't know, 80, 90 hours a week, right?
Wow.
And that was not healthy, nor was it actually conducive to doing the job well. Because if you're exhausted all the time and you're stressed and you're unhappy, you don't make good decisions
Sure.
and you don't treat the people you work with properly. So what I think is really important for me to do is, and I think this is probably important more generally, is I get 8 hours of sleep every night, no matter what, because I just read this really good book called Why We Sleep, all
Mm-hmm.
about the science of what happens while you're in sleep. I'm totally convinced the
Hmm.
most important productivity tool I've got is getting a good night's sleep. So that's kind of number one. But then I roll out of bed and then I'm here in my study. I'm in my study right now, and I spend a good long stretch here. And then I try to get out. You know, one of the things that makes it a little bit easier. So right, it looks like I'm all dressed up, but I'm actually wearing yoga shorts underneath. So I'll get off this call. I'll go down to my basement, do some down dog, some Supta Baddha Konasana, and all that kind of good stuff.
That's hysterical.
For a little bit. And then probably later on this afternoon, I'll jump on my bike, my two youngest kids' bike also. So we'll knock out a 25 or 30 mile ride, and then I'll you know, maybe hit a few more emails. And then after that, it's kind of cool because my kids, like most their age, were super involved in sports and music and every other thing. And so we're having family dinners for, you know, all together every night for the first time in, I don't know, 10, 12 years, something like that. So it's actually been this really kind of cool time of reconnecting as a family because we don't have other places to be.
Right.
So anyway, it's really, my life has gotten much simpler. It's my laptop and my family, and that's about it.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
No, I definitely agree. You definitely get to spend more time as a family unit together, which is for sure a positive.
It is. Now, and I will say, we recently, or I guess it's been about 2 years ago now, moved into a much larger house, which means that we all have our own space. And that's been key. And
That's a saving grace.
Oh my goodness. Being on top of each other would have been a little bit more challenging, but having a little space is good.
For sure. I know you mentioned the positive with your family, but is there any other positives you think we've gained either as a school or as a society from this unfortunate situation?
Well, you know, I think, so there are a couple of things, right? So, you know, I think the first thing is you don't really know what you're capable of as an individual or an institution until you're really put to the test, right?
Sure.
And so I've had really the great pleasure to see just exactly what our staff and faculty are capable of when they're really pressed and they've really risen to the occasion. So there's that. The second is we decided to rapid launch a number of new master's degrees online using both. The reality is, you know, some uncertainty for working professionals coming out of the pandemic, but also the fact that you know, all of our faculty have become experts in online delivery. And so we will use that developed expertise to have new online program. We'll have now 5 online master's degrees, 4 of which have launched in a 12-month period.
Wow.
So that's going to be the kind of thing that that I think will help shape the portfolio in a really important way going forward. And then I think the last kind of thing is like more from a social perspective. Events like this, I think, cause you to realize that, and this is going to sound very self-serving coming from someone with a PhD, but expertise really matters.
Mm-hmm.
You know, having people who know what they're talking about and can provide solutions really makes an enormous difference in the quality of governance that we have and in the quality of solutions we arrive at. And I think one of the things that we're seeing is in places that are very, very well run, that rely on experts, that you have good outcomes. And when that's not so much the case, then you run into problems. So I find that, again, it's a bit self-serving, but I'm a big believer that someone who has spent their entire life developing expertise in a topic is someone you should trust more than someone who has a random opinion about it on Twitter. And so I am hopeful that coming out of this will be a broader recognition of the merit of listening to experts.
For sure. I totally agree with all that. I think on more of an individual level, we all gained definitely a lesson in flexibility and adapting to the new scenarios that we're in, for sure, too.
Oh, completely agree with that. I mean, I think we all get used to the idea that just because we've done something a particular way, we should keep doing it that way.
Right.
And you'll find this is true of universities, this is true of family life, this is true of big, profitable corporations. There's a certain inertia in how we do what we do. And without a good reason to change it, why put in the effort?
Right.
So when you have to change to address a new situation, and you find that you're capable of it, it opens your eyes to how much more dynamic you can be as an organization.
For sure. I think we're going to wrap this up. This has been a great call. A quick reminder for our viewers. On May 21st, which is next Thursday, we have an Instagram Live with Jessica Chapman, who is the Associate Director of Undergrad Services for the KPDC at Krannert. And then the following Thursday, May 28th, Dean Hummels will be back with us again to talk about data at Purdue and, of course, everywhere. So Dean Hummels, thank you so much for your time. Is there anything else you'd like to tell our audience before you head out?
I just want to say to everybody, stay safe, stay healthy. And for those of you who might be wrapping up your high school careers in the coming weeks, good luck with your exams. And I hope you find this to be as normal and enjoyable a summer as can be under the circumstances. We really look forward to seeing you all in the fall.
For sure. Totally agree. Dean Hummels, thank you so much. We'll look forward to seeing you on the 28th.
Hey, thanks so much. Appreciate talking to you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.